Our Almighty God, Creator of heaven and earth, Father and lover of our soul, you sit on your throne of mercy and rule with your love and faithfulness. You are full of grace. We acknowledge your presence in our lives. Nothing is hidden in your eyes, even our challenges and struggles in life. We come to you with faith. We ask not only for our daily spiritual bread, but to seek your forgiveness and undeserving favor to heal our land, our family members, our friends and neighbors, even our enemies with COVID-19 and other diseases. Holy Spirit, help us to deepen our faith and see the opportunity to believe, obey, and worship. As we face this pandemic, you are Lord and God. Encourage us and change our hearts, not to fear, but to be full of hope and find ourselves praying and meditating your word. We believe no works of the enemy prosper to your children. Abba, Father, we believe that your Son Jesus Christ is Lord and Savior. He is the truth and our salvation. Hear our prayers, O Lord, and most of all, not our will, but thy will be done. We pray this in Jesus' name, the name above all names, who was and is to come. Amen.
The views and opinions of the producers, hosts, and guests in the show do not directly reflect the official stand and policies of the management, the network, and the company. We are now ready to kick in, only here in Sports Bytes. Want to know what's happening in the world of Philippine sports? Sports Bytes brings you latest news and trends in your favorite sports. Hear your favorite athletes and sports leaders tell their stories on just about anything that matters in sports. So sit back and relax as we bring Sports Bytes, only here in BigMedia Philippines, your home digital media network.
Hello and welcome to another episode of Sports Bytes Philippines in cooperation with BigMedia PH. For this episode, we talk about the NBA. With the playoff picture now taking shape, there were several teams who had an unceremonious exit. Joining me is a well-respected individual, someone who has written several books. He has had the privilege to meet and talk to multiple NBA players, making him the perfect sports scribe to talk about basketball. Everyone, please welcome veteran American scribe, Mr. Roland Lazenby.
Hello, Brian.
Hello, sir. It's nice meeting you and seeing you again and for another round of talks.
Likewise.
Okay, so let's get to it. Let's start the first segment. NBA playoffs at a glance. Were you surprised with what happened now with the NBA? How it's shaping up?
Yes, it's always hard. I edit Lindy's Pro Basketball Annual here in the United States. And every August, I have to try to gaze ahead to see what's going to happen. If you looked at things, it seems like 10 years ago that the Brooklyn Nets were assembling this whole roster for a second run at things, and you were figuring that the available talent with Kyrie Irving and James Harden and Kevin Durant and all those fabulous role players they had, that if you just looked on paper, they were the shoe-in for things. And so many things have gone on to change that. There were a lot of people who were excited about the Los Angeles Lakers on paper with the acquisition of Russell Westbrook, and that was a sure thing. Well, there are no sure things, except that we do know that the two teams that closed out last season in spectacular fashion are back at it again this year. The Phoenix Suns, they had a fabulous run to the NBA Finals last year. I must admit, I personally discounted that. I mean, it was a great season and I loved it, but Chris Paul, their great point guard, getting up in years, and I just thought, maybe that was a one-time thing. They've just had such a fantastic season. Chris Paul was injured. Injury comes with age. And boy, that team just kept on its great pace, even without him there. Now, they're much more potent with him on the floor, as we're seeing again, but they have such great coaching. And they have so many talented young players, and they play hard and smart. And so I have a newfound respect. They've taught me a lesson. And of course, the tendency is to think that what Giannis, the Greek freak, did in Milwaukee was another flash in the pan, that, they had their time for 2021, but in 2022, all the big guys would say, okay, you had your minute in the spotlight, time to get out of the way. Well, both of them are back. Both of them are playing very well. Both of them are very formidable here as we head into another playoff season in the USA.
So do you think that the Phoenix Suns, they have the best record right now heading into the play-in tournament. Do you think they can sustain that until the end?
Well, I'm not going to bet against them a second time. I do think that obviously the Western Conference is still loaded with good teams. And, the Warriors are interesting. Denver, the Denver Nuggets, an interesting team. Utah Jazz, an interesting team. There are a number of those that even the Dallas Mavericks, they have a different look. And a lot of people consider them an excellent dark horse to do some major things. But, Phoenix is really sound in the identity. And that begins with the coaching, and it's there are a lot of dandies in basketball coaching, but Phoenix isn't led by a dandy. It's led by a solid guy, and Coach Monty. And so I tend to really treasure consistency. And I think Phoenix has offered consistency for a good while now, a good run of months. I think the same thing in Milwaukee. Teams learn how to play at a high level, and it's learning how to bring it all together at a deeper level where people care on a different level. The more success, it really prepares them to have even more success. And so I start my thinking there. But I am excited. The Eastern Conference is more competitive than it's ever been, even though it's been, a pretty dizzying season in terms of everybody trading places and jumping around and doing all sorts of stuff.
How about the Miami Heat? Are you surprised that they're on top right now?
Um, I am not. The Miami Heat has a strong culture, obviously, that begins with, in some ways, with Pat Riley. It certainly begins with Eric Spoelstra. Um, you have to be strong in basketball. I remember years ago in the late 1980s when I began writing about and covering the NBA. And I realized, wow, what a business. You've got all these men with all this testosterone. They've got all this athletic ability. They're very large humans. And, it's also a huge cultural clash. And so the chemistry of the NBA was what fascinated me long ago. And just going in those locker rooms and talking to the coaches and the players, it gave me a perspective that this is a different thing. This is really a rare air kind of place. And so I think that the game has changed in so many ways. Old timers like me sometimes don't even recognize it a lot of nights. But the thing that hasn't changed is what I just described, that collection of very competitive people, players, coaches, staff people even. And so the NBA is high altitude stuff and in terms of testosterone and competitive nature.
How about out west? There was one team you didn't mention, the Memphis Grizzlies. They're currently second in the standings. Is this something that's a bit surprising?
Well, again, great coaching. The NBA is about talent, though. And the Memphis Grizzlies have lots and lots of young talent, not just Ja Morant, but a lot of people. And so the other thing you can't discount is youth and talent. And I think the Lakers have just gotten smacked in the face with that lesson. And so I wouldn't be surprised that the Grizzlies come in. I tend to subscribe to the view that it takes a while to learn to win championships. I spent a lot of time with the Detroit Pistons when Isaiah Thomas. I wrote a lot about the Detroit Pistons when Isaiah Thomas was trying to learn how to win a championship and to teach his teammates that lesson. And they had fits and starts in that. It was tough for them. Obviously, I've written Michael Jordan, The Life, and before that, I wrote lots and lots about the Chicago Bulls. So many of their championship stories and books, their official history. I've done lots of books. Obviously, the top one is Michael Jordan, The Life, but his life was the same narrative. He had immense frustration as that young, talented player. And so they'll have to disprove that in Memphis that narrative applies to them. And they could well do it because they've had a whiz-bang season. So we'll see. They may be ready. The playoffs, the other thing to keep in mind is the playoffs is such a different thing. And that really factors into how the game is played today. They want to play with pace and space, and they want to jack up all these three-pointers. And frankly, that's not how you win playoff basketball. Each possession becomes much more valuable. And that's why the Bucks ultimately were able to turn it around and win last year, because they were relying not just on three-pointers, but they had the mid-range game. They certainly attacked the rim. They just played smart, tough, really old school type of basketball. And I think that's one of the things that keeps the audience engaged. We're going to see playoff basketball. and it is a different bird. And a young team like Memphis, well, we'll see what kind of progress they're making. They have a bright coach and very bright players, so we'll see.
All right. Well, you were mentioning about youth. We're gonna talk about that team that you've been mentioning, the Los Angeles Lakers, in the second segment. For now, let's take a short break, Sir Roland. We'll be right back.
We'll be back for more sports talks only here in Sports Bytes.
Here now is the program for the millennials that will showcase young professionals' worth, aspirations, and successes in doing what they believe is right, progressive, and inclusive. Join them as they discover the path to self and societal fulfillment while making a difference. Hosted by empowered and cool millennial Erica Mizon, together with her fellow millennials, they will be making a difference. Only here on V81 Radio, Manila. Get into the treasure trove of undiscovered music through Napalm, your new all-Pinoy alternative music. Whether it's rock, metal, reggae, soul, or pop, we have it covered. Napalm features upcoming Pinoy artists and musicians, hosted by Lace Jimenez and Thunder God Bernard. So sit back and relax and enjoy Napalm, only here on V81 Radio, Manila.
It's a tough business out there. So many uncertainties, operational difficulties, deadlines. We provide the solutions and services that your company needs at the best price, guaranteed, with our global principles. And experienced partners, we bring solutions to your current and future business. Inolution, supporting your business as always. We are now ready to kick in, only here in Sports Bytes.
Welcome back to the second segment. I'm still with Mr. Roland Lazenby, who's I'm getting a lot of good information from him as usual. So, Sir Roland, let's tackle the Los Angeles Lakers. I mean, everybody's talking about them right now. Plainly put, it was a disaster. I mean, what did you see went wrong, or was it wrong in the first place when they built this team before the season started?
Well, hindsight is 2020, but this was the kind of off-season for the Lakers last year that left people really scratching their heads. And, the old saying, the grass is always greener. Well, the Lakers were sort of caught up in that. They had a beautiful team. We're in a different age. This is the age where players have all the power, and no player is more powerful than LeBron James. Just because you're powerful doesn't mean you're free from making mistakes. In fact, sometimes the more power you have, the more prone you are to overthinking, overdoing, overmoving. And of course, I've spent the last 4 years working on a biography of Magic Johnson, to follow my biographies of Kobe Bryant and Michael Jordan and Jerry West, these titanic figures. And Magic Johnson came on TV and this week in the United States and pointed out that, there had been options last summer that were there on the table for the Lakers. Some of those options had come to him, and management had sort of looked away from those and jumped in on the LeBron James plan to sign Russell Westbrook and to trade away so much of their young talent, their defensive abilities, so many of the things that really created the spine of the team. And obviously, Magic felt it was a mistake. It now very clearly appears to have been a mistake. And it got me to thinking, when Phil Jackson came to the Lakers in the fall of 1999, I just spent all this time in Chicago with the Bulls. I'd spent years there with my great friend, the late Tex Winter, Phil's top assistant. And there was a saying around the Lakers, we need somebody to stand up to Phil Jackson. And of course, at that time, the great Jerry West was the general manager of the Lakers. And he was the kind of guy who could stand up, but he and Phil had no working relationship. And Phil very quickly set about forcing Jerry West out as general manager, which would happen after that first season. But suddenly, Tex Winter, my old friend, was the one guy in the Lakers who could stand up to Phil Jackson and say, Phil, your ego's out of control. Your sense of power is, you're making a mistake. And it's not easy when you have those powerful guys to say those things. We're in a world situation where we have a tyrant in Russia, and nobody around him can stand up to him and say, look, Mr. Putin, look what you're doing. You don't say that to a tyrant. You lose your head if you say it to a tyrant. In the NBA, if you say it to a big, powerful, egotistical boss, you lose your job. You lose your standing. It can come with dire consequences. Tex was just such a truth teller. He'd worked with Phil so long and had taught him much about the game, he could still tell him those things. Well, now the thought in Los Angeles is that everybody felt so grateful to LeBron James for coming to their team when things were in, the Lakers had been in such disarray. And LeBron James came in and really did some very fine things for Los Angeles. And, you can fault LeBron's use of power in these circumstances, but everything that he's done on the floor as a player has been magnificent. And so many things he's done in Los Angeles as a citizen have been magnificent. But the saying in Los Angeles now is there's no one in the Lakers. They're also appreciative, and no one who really has that standing to say, LeBron, you're out of control. You're getting ready to throw away a perfectly good roster, a perfectly good set of players on a wild gamble that somehow Russell Westbrook is going to come in and be the one leopard in all of nature to change his spots, particularly an old leopard. And so Russell Westbrook has not changed his spots. He is still a pretty cynical guy, as one of his coaches spent a lot of time explaining to me a few years back. And it's sad. He's still a great player. He does amazing things, but he has to be in a certain context. And the Lakers were not a good team for Russell Westbrook's game. Now, they're going to run that back next year unless some kind of miracle happens, because they're married to Russell Westbrook with the size of the deal and all of those things. And so this is a lesson that they're going to have to keep learning. But, LeBron James is a bright guy. He may feel others are to blame too. Anthony Davis's injuries, his inability to to train sufficiently to prepare himself for a season. He's coming under some scrutiny for that. And so it's hard to say what cards are going to be dealt in the off season. Is Coach Vogel going to get fired? Is Coach Frank Vogel? Is the top basketball executive Rob Pelinka, is he gone because he's not strong enough to stand up to LeBron? We won't know those things, but it is Hollywood. This is a soap opera. And so we're going to have plenty. We're going to hear lots about it in the media because the Lakers are the ordained ones. Meanwhile, I love all these other teams that are just playing great basketball, like the Miami Heat. They've had their moments and their drama, and they've withstood it. And answering about your original question about the Heat, Coach Spoelstra is a guy very used to being around lots of testosterone, and he's a guy who knows how to handle that. And he's got a fair amount of it himself. And so what we'll find in the playoffs is that going to work for the Heat? There's Philadelphia in the East. You still can't, Brooklyn's in the play-in thing now, but you still can't count them out because we know how deadly Kevin Durant can be. I mean, he almost delivered big things last year with a much depleted roster. And, unfortunately, Chicago has had a strong season. It still possibly could, but the injuries have really taken a toll there. There's still a lot to be seen. And so and the Knicks may somehow find a playoff revival. I don't know. But they're all going to be around, and they're all going to be part of the story of what we call the second season, the playoffs.
You mentioned Frank Vogel and Rob Pelinka. Is it fair to pin some blame on them?
Oh, I think when things fall apart, people all over the world are now familiar with the Last Dance season with the Bulls. I was there for all of that, interviewing everybody, Tex Winter in my ear virtually every day, telling me the whole story. And my conclusion, I wrote a book called Blood on the Horns about that season. And my conclusion was they all owned a piece of it. It really gets down there. There are huge egos. I think I've told you before, Chuck Daly in the late 1980s, when he was coaching the Pistons, gave me a piece of wisdom that managing an NBA team is sort of like managing 12 to 15 corporations, individual corporations at once. And that's the power of players today in this age of media and sports and huge money, unbelievable money for players. And so everybody, Pelinka, Vogel, James, you go right down the list. Everybody involved. Davis, they're all going to own a piece of it. It's on them. As Bill Walton told me once, he doesn't remember much of the victories or think much about them. But, in his great career at UCLA and then playing and winning a championship for Portland in the late 70s, he could dream about all that old glory, but he really thinks about the losses, the times when things didn't work out. And he said, those things were the stains on my soul, he told me one day. And so they all got some stains on their souls when you let a season and an opportunity get away, especially LeBron James. I mean, he is a locomotive. He came in at a very young age. He has the opportunity to stack up all the most points, all of this and all of that. And every year the window gets a little tighter for him. So he missed a huge opportunity this year. And he certainly overshot in terms of his planning and his thinking.
for the Lakers, do you think this win now strategy that they're employing, is it time to change it and maybe follow what the Phoenix Suns, the Memphis Grizzlies, or even other young teams up and coming? Like Phoenix for one. Well, the only star that comes to mind there are Devin Booker, Chris Paul, and the rest are upstarts. Do you think it's time for the Lakers to reconsider that again?
Well, when I was a young man, I don't know why, but I ended up in a number of fistfights. And when you get your nose bloodied sometime, and I don't care how often or who you fight, sometime you're going to get your nose bloodied. And so there's no greater feedback than a good old punch in the schnoz. And that's basically what the Lakers have absorbed. And so when you absorb one of those, you step out of the ring and you think about it. Why? And so the Lakers have got a lot of soul searching to do. Now, unfortunately, we live in a culture where sometimes mixed in with the soul searching is a lot of finger pointing. And so we'll find out a lot about the Lakers' character. By that, the character of the top people, the character of the organization. And we'll see, what is their true mettle.
Okay. So I guess that's it for the second segment. And we're going to dig deeper into the individuals, the key individuals. I mean, we've been talking about them earlier, Sir Roland. But before that, let's pause for a few reminders.
We'll be back for more sports talks, only here in Sports Bytes. Big Media is all about life's journey.
Yung mga yun, mga bata pa sila dati nung nakakasama ko sila. So ngayon, sikat na sila. Kaya
In digital. Entertainment.
Maraming salamat po na nabigyan niyo kami ng opportunity.
Information. Story. Inspiration. And experiences. Whenever, wherever you want, welcome. Join us as we push the boundaries of possibility here with Big Media.
Welcome to Pride and Proud Asia, Asia's first online radio show that champions LGBT contribution and leadership in business and in our country and the region. Hosted by the Philippine LGBT Chamber of Commerce, visibility, representation, and empowerment. This is Pride and Proud Asia. Happy Pride!
Evolving your communities to be the linking, bigger, and preferred group, growing and scaling, becoming bigger and better. Let us build out these business milestones for your company as we lead you to amplify and reach out and engage here at Talk Shop Asia Power Network Season 3, hosted by direct selling sensei Jojo Barakias and ASEAN EduTech leader Dr. Alex Reyes, co-hosted by Organizational Development Network champion Maricar Sandalo, and we have digital culture and lifestyle coach Joshua Ravales, with the founding anchor, business and transformation mentor Rolly Pagaspas. So now, take your journey, lead the pack, and unleash your power while we do the rest of the work for the CEOs, communities, and sustainability of Talk Shop Asia Power Network, now on its Season 3. Malayo ang tingin. Malayo ba ang tingin mo sa hinihintay mong tricycle? Uwing-uwi ka na ba? Kaya pa ng legs mo. Tricycle hailing app Para Hero is here to serve you. Through the Para Hero mobile app, you can easily book your tricycle ride within your community all day, every day. So whether you're at home, your favorite place, or gusto mo na talagang umuwi, ora mismo, Para Hero app is here for you. Just download Para Hero mobile app in Google Play. Register, it's that easy, and you're ready to book. Para Hero is initially available in BF Homes Parañaque and Las Piñas area. But soon, sa community mo din, malapit na po, Para Hero, para sa pasahero. We are now ready to kick in. Only here in Sports Bytes.
Welcome back. Here we are in the third and final segment, and now we're going to go deeper into the Lakers, particularly the players. Well, there's no other name that comes to mind than Russell Westbrook. This is a guy that's gonna make around 47 million next season. And I recently read that he's not planning to take on a buyout. And I know you explained that to me before, Sir Roland, that when you get a buyout, it means something. What do you see is gonna happen to Russell Westbrook?
Well, I'm not wearing a turban. I'm no Swami, but I just don't think the economics of the NBA allow the Lakers to move him. They could package him with a number one pick, perhaps, and find a way to move him somewhere and pay some of his salary. They maybe could buy him out. I would be just stunned at both of those. I think that, there's a saying, you make your bed, you have to lie in it. I think they made their bed when they acquired him. They got rid of all those fine role players and defenders and the kind of people, boy, they could have really used them this season. And so I think, I said in an earlier segment a month or so ago, we're going to see a lot about how people respond to things, what they do, and that is the telling thing. And so the off season is going to be very big in Los Angeles. Now, it's not going to be big in a public way, but there are going to have to be some conversations, some renewed vows, some idea that they're all going to share a value system. Because I think one of the problems is, and this usually happens if you have a political breakdown, if you have a sports team breakdown, if you have any industry a breakdown, the value system is not shared by everyone. And so a lot of the heart-to-heart really involves sitting down and figuring out if this Lakers team shares values. Does Russell Westbrook share the values of LeBron James? Do they care really deeply about the same thing? Or is Russell Westbrook in a place where he's just fine with whatever happens? He's got his money, his family, and he sees no need to compromise or change, which is sort of what was explained to me about him and what we've seen. And so they're going to have to go forward with Russell Westbrook. But the question is going to be, is he going to be a person that wants to share values and really humble himself a bit to be a part of that team? And those things are hard to do. These superstars, we treat them like they are gods way up in the heavens looking down on the rest of us. And they're just folks. They're just people. But with all that status, finding humility can be a difficult thing. It has been made worse because the fan base in Los Angeles has not been happy with Russell Westbrook. And the media, have not been happy. He's been called out by a variety of people. And so he's quite a mystery sitting there. In fact, it's Hollywood. They love mysteries. They love to make movies about mysteries. Well, they've got a mystery on their hands now.
Well, we saw, we were talking since the start of the season that Westbrook needs to adjust. And it's already the end of the season and still there's no improvement. I'm thinking, correct me if I'm wrong, sir, is this an indication of Westbrook's game declining? Or is it just really seeing him not being on the right team?
Well, you know, it is true that certain players are ball dominant, and we've created an age where players have to be ball dominant. Certain ones, these guys, and the success comes in getting them to be less ball dominant. We're seeing progress with the Dallas Mavericks because Jason Kidd has come a long way in showing Luka Doncic the way to spread that mojo around the roster. And that's been true in every great basketball story. It was true of Michael Jordan and the Bulls. That's why the triangle offense was used. And you know, the Philippines, gosh, I can't think of a greater object lesson than the great Tim Cone's teams. You know, that is basketball at its source. When we love the game, we love the five-man concept, the sharing. Yes, we sell tickets in the NBA with superstars. You know, you got to blow it up big. And the Lakers are a team, they always got to have some big names to sell all those season tickets, because that is some high price real estate sitting courtside in Los Angeles. And so the star power, the lights, the wattage, all of that's so big, it's blinding. And so, again, shared values. Are they going to get back to just playing basketball? Or are they moving up and down the court and hauling around huge egos with it? That's very hard. You can be one of the fastest guys in the NBA. You can be an incredible leaper. You can be quite a dunker. But if you're hauling around a huge ego, boy, that creates a degree of difficulty. That really obliterates a lot of shared values. I don't know. We're going to find out. But, you know, we have to have these big stars. You know, I don't write my books about role players. I have to write books about great, big, powerful stars, because that's what everybody wants to read about. You don't create your shows and write your stories about a whole lot of role players.
True.
All of the fan base wants to know about the stars, but we need to know about those stars. What is their shared value system with their teammates? Are they really cognizant of what basketball really is? The team game, the shared ball, the things that have been around and endured for decades and decades.
Okay, let's shift to the main guy, LeBron James. I mean, I guess he was expecting to win a title, and he's not getting any younger, and the injuries are starting to show. What do you think's going on in his mind right now? I mean, there are suggestions that he might be thinking of championship, joining another team. I don't know. What do you think? What was your assessment on LeBron James right now?
Well, you know, that requires some fine tuning inside the minds of a very powerful man in terms of his world. And, you know, I've said this is the age of player power. It used to be the owners had all the power just about in basketball, and the owners were a mixed lot. You had a few owners who were very wise. You had a lot of them that made lots of bad decisions and were goofy and screwed up a lot of things. And so I don't view the age of player power as a bad thing, but I don't think players are infallible. They may do a better job sometimes than the owners, but that's not guaranteed. And obviously this year, LeBron James, whether he'll ever admit it or not, really pushed the wrong agenda. He misjudged. And he did that late in his career when you're supposed to be wise. Now, he has shown plenty of wisdom in his life. And so but he also doesn't suffer things that go contrary to his interests very well. And so we'll see where this heads. He is older. He is magnificent in his approach and what he does. As far as his on-court play, you can't fault that. He's willing to sacrifice and move around. He is not determined to be ball dominant himself, although he's perfectly capable of dominating the ball. But he was taught right at a young age, and he has those instincts. He has that piece of value system. I think that the one knock in his legacy, and I think it is probably true of the age, not just LeBron James, is that he's jumped around a bit to sort of go where the grass was green, where the winds were blowing gently, and just do what suited him. And so if he takes off for yet another team, that may come to be viewed as cynicism. I don't know. That's his calculation. And he has lots of people helping manage his career, people that he's known for a long time, representatives that by virtue of representing him in themselves have a lot of power. And so they're going to have a power powwow there in Los Angeles. And they're going to look over things. I don't think that Jeannie Buss, who is the owner / executive in charge of things, is going to be eager to see LeBron James walk out the door. So the difficulty is the Lakers need somebody to stand up to LeBron James, but that's a phrase that needs to be in quotations, because that also requires a lot of subtlety and a lot of context. And, they haven't been working together forever. So we'll find out how good those relationships are in Los Angeles. A lot of noise is being made about the trading of Anthony Davis because of his injuries and his lack of clarity on off-season conditioning. I don't know if that's true or not. I'm not around with him in the summers looking at what he's doing. But that is the noise. And so we'll just have to see. It is a big drama. It means that folks who write and talk about basketball are going to have to do a lot of writing and a lot of talking about the Lakers this offseason, because not only is the NBA all about star power, but that's especially true in Hollywood. And it is a big deal.
Given the star power of the Lakers, who, everybody saw them good on paper, would you say that this is the most disappointing Lakers team you've ever seen?
No, the Lakers have had some disappointing teams. And those things often come when you engage older players who have big reputations. And if you're in the business of selling star power, well, I've said in my book on Magic Johnson, there's nothing sadder in all of Hollywood than a star whose time has started to pass. And so the Lakers have had their share of sadness in that regard, despite all those championships they've won. But they've also won some championships with older players who have Jerry West and Wilt Chamberlain and Elgin Baylor, finally won a championship together in 72. And they were not young players when they did it. I would say that the Lakers are going to have to be very smart to find some talent. They really took a major gamble. They went all in on this Russell Westbrook thing. And wow, they're going to have to live with that a while. I don't really know where it heads. I know this: when you lose a lot, and I'm not talking about games, when you lose a lot of the youthful power and talent that you had amassed, answers suddenly become very short, very rare, very hard to come by.
All right. So I think I've got a lot of information from you, Sir Roland. But before we end this, I'd like to get an update. I know, is the book already done? I mean, the one with magic?
Well, yeah, I have an 800-page manuscript, and I just went to hear magic speak at a traditionally Black college in the United States. And I have had the opportunity. I finished the book, the first draft, last June.
Oh, okay.
It's a huge undertaking that has challenged my life like no other project. And that's saying a lot, because I wrote a 700-page book on Michael Jordan, that is in 20 languages around the globe, 21 now. And it is a Michael Jordan the life. It sells and has been received so very well. I have a 600-page book on Kobe Bryant that itself is in about a dozen languages around the globe. And it sells because there's so many people who identify with Kobe. It's a book called Showboat, The Life of Kobe Bryant. And so this book on Magic Johnson, he has such a unique life. He was such a unique player. He's not just a player. He's had this wonderful life as a businessman. And of course, he became HIV positive because he had lots and lots of unprotected sex back in the 1980s. As sometimes movie stars or sports stars or very popular public people are wont to do. And so it's a complicated story. And he has also lived all these years while being HIV positive. So many of my books really address the mysteries around the lives of these great figures and their families. I trace their families back generations. And so it's a big story. That's my long-winded way of saying I'm just actually wrapping up the final rewrite of the final chapter this weekend.
Oh, nice. I'm sure there's going to be a lot of untold stories, Sir Roland.
There are. And, the other part of it is just getting the whole story down in one place, and getting it all in order. We get everything almost in rapid fire as a mosaic through the technology of our cultures. A TV story here, a newspaper story there, a magazine story, a short, quick book, documentaries. But I really try to get it all there, and then to get it in a timeline that, and all the social context that goes with, excuse me, something as complicated as race in America. And So Magic Johnson's life is a quintessential American story in so many ways. And it's a global story with HIV and the millions of people who have died from AIDS. And so it's just taken a while to put all of this together and to try to be very thoughtful about it and to have a good entertaining read that people like turning the pages on.
Is there any target date for release of the publication?
Yes, it will come out in the fall of 2023.
Oh, okay.
The publisher will have to take time and editing and preparing all the marketing and all of the things that go into a big book like that.
That's one book I'm sure I need to get. Hopefully.
Oh, I certainly hope so. You know, the Philippines is one of the world's great basketball cultures. And when you speak of shared values, it is one of the shared values globally. And so I think I've expressed before how important the Philippines has been to me. And I know it is to other people who love basketball, who write about it, who broadcast about it. It is part of that great connection. You know, there are cultures in the United States. Certain states are very big basketball cultures. Pardon me. Obviously, the University of North Carolina and all of the ACC centered in North Carolina makes North Carolina this fabulous basketball culture. And then, of course, there's the Midwest with Chicago, and there's maybe no state like Indiana in terms of, and so the Philippines is right there. And then the state of Kentucky with the great University of Kentucky tradition. And then everywhere you turn, there are states like Texas that, you know, has teams bubbling up, whether college or pros. And we haven't even talked about Los Angeles and all the great UCLA teams of John Wooden, and then the great Lakers Showtime teams, and on into the Kobe, Shaq era and beyond, and LeBron era. And so these cultures, I think the Philippines is right there hand in hand with those great cultures. And they identify themselves primarily, in my mind, through the passion of the fans, but also in the quality the basketball played. And I should have silenced my cell phone. I'm
okay.
your usual nitwit. I apologize for that.
No problem, sir. We're about to end anyway. I'd just like to ask, sir, before we end the show, your final words or thoughts you'd like to share, or if you want to greet anybody or invite our viewers.
Well, I just want to let that cell phone finish ringing. Okay. My thought that is so important is the great pride that fans in the Philippines take in their game, in their leagues, in their traditions. And I just think you can't have anything finer in a culture. I really believe, now I'm not a particularly religious person. I am spiritual, but I'm not one of these guys that says one religion has it over another. I don't know. I don't claim to know, but I do know that Dr. James Naismith, who invented basketball, invented a game. He was a man of faith, and it was invented at a school for missionaries, of course, in Springfield, Massachusetts. And within a very short time of its invention, it was being played all over the place. There were teams popping up in Asia everywhere, and it very quickly came to be owned by the cultures that fell in love with it. And so I just think fans in the Philippines need to celebrate that all they can, because it is a wonderful national treasure for the Philippines.
Right. Thank you, Sir Roland. And I'm sure I'm going to bug you again before the NBA Finals, more or less.
Oh, Brian, I look forward to our talks. It's lots of fun.
Yeah.
And I'm always happy to do it. And I appreciate you thinking of me.
Sir, I look up to you, and you're one of my prime sources for good stories.
Well, the feeling is mutual. I think we obviously have great respect for each other, and we share basketball across many time zones, and we're able to share it through technology. So, in many ways, we live in a troubled world, but it remains a very amazing world too.
Speaking of Tim Cohn, he's battling with for another championship right now.
Oh wow! then I'm doubly happy that everything I said about the Philippines, I know that has all of the national interest stirred. There's nothing more important than helping to define what is truly valuable for a whole culture, a whole nation, a whole region. It is, and ultimately for the whole world. And so that's a big thing. If you talk to him, and I'll send him a message.
Yeah, you
I'll
should.
I'll wish him the best of luck. I'm working on my Magic Johnson book. I'm actually sort of inhabiting another world. You live somebody's life while you're doing a big biography. You got to keep track of everything. And so I lose track of all the things going on that matter to me. Thank you for reminding me of that.
I'm sure he's going to appreciate it. They're currently tied 1-1 in the best of 7.
I'm going to message him when I get off.
All right. Well, anyway, thank you, everybody. We hope you enjoyed our talk with Mr. Roland Lazenby. And for sure, I'll be inviting him again once we get to the NBA Finals. But at that point, we will be talking only about 2 teams.
Right. But we'll have lots of the playoff to examine too after it happens.
Yep, that's true. Anyway, thank you, everybody. We hope you enjoyed this episode, and please do tune in and join us for our next one. Stay safe, everybody.
Always tune in to Sports Bytes, the show where the athletes and sports leaders reveal the stories you wanted to know. Be updated in latest happenings and what's in store in world of Philippine sports and beyond. Only here in Sports Bytes, every Friday at 8 p.m. Brought to you by BigMedia Philippines, your home digital media network.
Audio Jungle.